There are a lot of monsters in D&D. From powerful pit fiends to lowly goblins, your average campaign will see the party facing off with a whole horde of different creatures. While many of these monsters are household names, dragons, vampires, liches, and orcs to name a few, what about those that fly under the radar? What hidden gems does the monster manual hold? That's what I'm here to answer. In this video, I want to tell you about some of the monsters that I think get overlooked by many, but could be great additions to your campaign. Of course, what's considered underrated is subjective, but I've tried to pick monsters that generally don't get as much attention as your giants and beholders, but I think have really cool powers, abilities, or flavor that make them stand out. Without further ado, let's get started. Mosquitoes are probably the most hated animals on the planet. They suck your blood, spread disease, and are just generally a nuisance. Now imagine mosquitoes that are the size of fruit bats and literally attach themselves to you as they feed. We call that a Stirge, and they are the perfect little monsters to harass your players with. They only have 2 hit points and aren't particularly hard to hit, but a swarm of Stirges can be a real pain for your party. When they hit, the Stirge attaches to the player, draining even more hit points automatically at the start of each of its turns that it's attached. And because these are tiny creatures, multiple can latch onto one player at a time. This makes Stirges perfect creatures to throw into a swarm. In bigger numbers, they could quickly become a problem. And just like how mosquitoes live in almost every corner of the planet, you can fit them into basically any adventure. Swarms of Stirges could be roosting in mountain caves, forest trees, city sewers, or an abandoned farmhouse. Anywhere there's creatures to feed on, you can find Stirges. And I think that versatility is exactly why they're underrated. Do you know what's terrifying? Tunneling humanoid insects whose very gaze can confuse and bewilder adventurers. That's an Umber Hulk, and they're CR5 monsters that can pop up almost anywhere in a campaign. And I mean that literally. They're tunnelers, so it's very easy to fit them into an adventure, since they could be burrowing under any city, road, or ancient tomb, really. Like the better-known basilisk, an Umber Hulk forces your players to choose between looking away or facing their gaze and making a saving throw. But unlike the giant lizards, an Umber Hulk confuses rather than petrifies, like they're under a slightly stronger version of the confusion spell. Meaning a player caught in their stare might do nothing, run in a random direction, or take a swing at a nearby creature, friend or foe. Though not as high stakes as petrification, that may be a bit more fun for parties without access to restoration spells. Beyond the fact your players will never beat them in a snaring contest, Umber Hulks have other qualities that make them interesting to use in a fight. 3 attacks per turn, the ability to tunnel through solid rock, and tremor sense to get the jump on unsuspecting adventurers means if you really want to be mean, Umber Hulks could do a lot to your party before they even know what's happening. Next time you're looking for something that'll force your players to make risky decisions in battle and probably creep them out, don't sleep on Umber Hulks. Umber Hulks might not petrify, but this next creature does. Unlike the more popular basilisk though, they're much weaker, have to hit your players first, and it only lasts for a day. Cockatrice might only come in at a CR of 1/2, but they have a deadly weapon. Each one has a bite attack that will force your players to save against being restrained, and if they fail, they'll need to save again on their next turn or be petrified. This petrification only lasts 24 hours though, so even if your party doesn't have a way to restore their ally, it isn't permanent. That still makes a flock of angry cockatrice threatening for low-level parties, swooping in and out of the trees, biting their prey, and trying to drag off anyone who ends up as a statue. But personally, I think they're best used as support for your bigger villains, or a wrench you can throw in to spice up an encounter. Your big pirate boss just got a little creepier and a little harder with a cockatrice perched on their shoulder, ready to assist in battle. Or that goblin ambush deep in the woods may take a turn when one of these freakish birds soars in, looking to pick off a weaker player and get them back to their nest. They may not be the flashiest flying creature in the monster manual. There's certainly deadlier foes out there, but a well-placed cockatrice can add a lot to an adventure. Sending your players deep beneath the sea can create some of the most tense moments of a campaign, as your players have to grapple with both the challenges of underwater combat and the ocean monsters who live there. Between merfolk, kuatoa, aboleth, and kraken, you have a lot of options to choose from when it comes to watery foes, but let me suggest the humble Chuul for your next aquatic adventure. They're CR4, so a good fight for lower level parties, but can still be a challenge in groups as they grow stronger. They can also sense magic, so for your average adventurer decked out in enchanted items, they can seek them out as they journey below the waves. Each Chuul gets 2 pincher attacks that they can use to grapple your players, but it's their tentacles that they really need to worry about, because they can use those tendrils to paralyze players who are caught in their claws, in addition to their regular attacks. Able to breathe on both land and in the water with a walking and swim speed, you can even have Chuul attacking your players out of the water, raiding beachside villages and stalking forest ponds. Whether by land or sea, Chuuls can be a fun addition to your campaigns. what's covered in scales, can swallow characters whole, and has lightning breath to boot? If you guessed blue dragons, you're wrong. They can't actually swallow PCs, which is kind of weird. Dragons can't do that. But anyway, I'm talking about Behir, CR11 terrors that have a lot of different weapons for challenging your players. While they can't fly and don't get legendary actions either, Behir can be just as frightening as their winged cousins, beyond their devastating lightning breath, which does the same damage on average as an adult blue dragon, just with a lower saving throw. They can use their twisting bodies to constrict enemies and then swallow your players whole. Anyone unfortunate enough to find themselves inside the monster will take acid damage each time the beast goes. And even though they can only swallow one adventure at a time, they can then focus their energy on biting and constricting others while that player is slowly digested. Beyond their impressive weapons, Behir also have a walking speed of 50 feet, so not many characters can escape them on foot. They can also climb 40 feet too, more than enough to get out of range and then smite your players from afar with that lightning breath. When you don't want to throw a whole dragon at your party, but still want some similar flavor in a fight, a Behir is a great alternative that should still give them plenty of difficulty. Maybe too much if they aren't prepared. Animated armor, but better. That's the general pitch for the next monster on our list, Helmed Horrors. No haunted castle or vampire's lair would be complete without a couple sets of living armor, but Helmed Horrors are more interesting in every way. While still giving you the flavor of moving, fighting pieces of plate mail, Helmed Horrors hit harder, have advantage to save against all magic, and can even be immune to 3 spells. The monster manual lists Lightning Bolt and Fireball as suggestions. They're a significantly higher CR than animated armor, 4 compared to 1, but that means they're much more useful throughout a campaign. A Helmed Horror can make a good boss in itself for a low-level party, while a group can harass higher-level players as guards in boss layers. They can also fly, which is wild. Imagine your evil bad guy flying in, flanked by a legion of Helmed Horrors. Tell me that isn't the coolest thing you've ever heard. Throw in a high AC and a ton of resistances and immunities, and these constructs will more than earn their place in your next adventure. Bandits, goblins, orcs, you can bet that most roadside raids in a campaign will consist of one of those 3 groups. But what if your players were ambushed by warriors who can blend into the terrain itself and then attack with both weapons and psionic powers? That sounds a lot more terrifying, and it's made possible not with these, but by using Thri-Kreen. Insect-like warriors with 6 arms, Thri-Kreen's chameleon carapace trait gives them advantage on stealth checks, so they should have no problem sneaking up on your party. When they do attack, each fighter has access to bite and claw attacks, the former of which will force your players to save against being poisoned. Fail by too much, and they'll even be paralyzed until they can roll high enough to break free. But the variant options that the monster manual provide add even more fun to their arsenal. Beyond more weapons, including some with range, it gives details on how to customize some of the monsters with psionic powers, letting them cast spells like invisibility and blur. Invisible psychic raiders with multiple arms, flinging strange weapons and biting with poison jaws. That's the stuff of nightmares. Throw these at your party, and they might even start casting alarm around their campsites, just in case. For my final monster, I'm going to cheat just a little bit and pick one from Monster of the Multiverse instead of the monster manual, so you know it's a good one. This creature combines a bunch of different abilities and weapons from ones that we've already talked about, meaning, in my opinion, they should be showing up in a bunch of different campaigns. They are Froghemoth, otherwise known as the party's worst nightmare. Coming in at CR10, these aren't the most powerful monsters you'll ever find, but their range of abilities are what makes them so interesting. First, that they're amphibious, at home in both land and water, with a swim speed of 30 feet to back that up. So whether your players are underwater or just happen to be passing by a lake or river, these big boys can show up and ruin their day. They don't even need to leave the water, not with their tongue, which they can use to target a player 20 feet away and, barring a successful strength save, pull them right on over. Once they've been reeled in, things only get worse. Next comes the bite attack, and just like a Behir, if it hits your player, they'll be swallowed whole. But unlike the Behir, Froghemoth can hold 2 creatures in their stomach at a time instead of just 1. And before your other players can get close enough to retaliate, the monster can use its tentacles to reach out 20 feet and grab them, holding the would-be heroes at bay while their friends are made into a meal. Are Froghemoths the strongest monster in all of D&D? No. Are they the most iconic? Definitely not. But they are very cool, can challenge your players in a variety of ways, and are guaranteed to leave an impression on the party. And that's what this list is all about. Those are a few monsters who, in my opinion, deserve some more love. I hope you've gotten some inspiration for future adventures, and maybe a couple ideas on how to humble your cockier players. Do you have D&D monsters that you think are underrated, or maybe disagree with some of the ones on my list? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, leaving a like is always appreciated. You might also consider subscribing to the Bard's College. I have a whole series where I talk about different monsters and how to use them in your games, as well as all sorts of stuff on D&D and DMing. So if you like this one, stick around. But for now, good luck, and remember, crit your players.